Welcome back to Comics Are Dope. I'm BJ Kicks, and I've got a really fun interview to bring to you today. I had a conversation with Greg Pak that you don't want to miss, but before we get to that, I do want to just let you know that I know you're listening to this on the audio streamer of your choice. I appreciate that. Leave a rating and review, by the way. But did you know that we actually record all these videos or all these podcasts, interviews on video as well? So you can actually get those full video interviews on our YouTube channel. You just got to be a channel member. So there are 2 levels of membership in the channel. There's our $1.99 tier. It's called the Channel Squad. Gets you early access to certain content, behind the scenes videos, sort of state of the channel addresses. And it gets you put in the running for special prizes during our subscriber milestone giveaways. So really cool. But it's just a tip jar to let us know that we're doing a great job here. Help keep the lights on. And then the $4.99 tier is our channel family. And channel family, you get all the same things. You get the early access. You get the full video interview library from the Comics Are Dope podcast. But you guys are also in the running for even more exclusive prizes and giveaways. So super exciting stuff going on over at the Comics Are Dope YouTube channel. I just wanted to make sure you are able to be a part. You have that opportunity. We just celebrate our 10,000 subscriber milestone, but we're going to actually do a giveaway stream on March 21st, 2024. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel. As long as you are a channel member, you're eligible for some exclusive higher priced prizes, but just being a subscriber puts you in the running. So check out the channel. Stay tuned to your notifications. That way you know exactly how to enter all the giveaways. And now I want to bring it back to my conversation with Greg Pak. Well, guys, today's guest, you know him from his many works. He's a super accomplished writer. He's worked on pretty much every character from Star Wars to Hulk and now Lilo and Stitch. And he's here to talk to me. So we're talking with Greg Pak today. Thanks, Greg, for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's no problem at all, man. Just going through, I like to go through, their sort of bibliography, right? And there's just such a range of characters there. Like I said, from Star Wars and Hercules, all sorts of franchises. I guess people probably most closely associate you with the Hulk. But now you're writing Lilo and Stitch here for Dynamite. And that does seem like kind of off the beaten path for you. How do we end up with Lilo and Stitch?
Well, in terms of, it felt right up my alley when Nate Cosby called me up to offer it to me. Nate was actually the assistant editor on the Hulk books back in the day when we were doing Planet Hulk and World War Hulk and everything else. Also on the Hercules books. And I've just kept in touch with him over the years and worked with him on a number of books. And I think he knew that, I don't know, he just thought it would be a good match. He knew that I had a sense of humor. He knew that I cared about Asian Pacific Islander stuff and that I'd also worked in some kids' books. I'm best known for the Hulk and Darth Vader, but I've been writing all ages books like Met Cadet U, which I did for Boom, and then I did these kids books, Princess Who Saved Herself, The Princess Who Saved the World, that we did Kickstarters for. They're based on a Jonathan Coulton song. Taka Miyazawa drew them. They're gorgeous. So I'd been doing this kind of stuff. I also did some middle grade Stranger Things books of all things. It kind of cracks me up because Stranger Things is essentially like R-rated, right? But
right.
Did these kids books, middle grade books, comics, because kids watch the show. Yeah. It reminds me of back in the day when I'm Gen X, so I was like I remember when Alien came out, the movie Alien, they were making kids toys, like Alien kids toys, and kids supposedly weren't supposed to see that movie, but of course they were. So anyway, but Lilo and Stitch, I think it just made sense to Nate. And when I started digging back into it, it was like, I kind of have to do this.
Mm.
Like it hits all my buttons. I love sci-fi. I love genre stuff. I love family stuff and stuff with a lot of real heart.
Mm.
And Lilo Stitch has all that. And I love stories which have representation of some different kind. And
Mm.
back in the day when Lilo and Stitch came out, it was my favorite. I mean, it remains my favorite of the modern Disney movies,
Mm.
animated movies. And so it was amazing. One big thing from the beginning, though, was that I knew I'm Asian American. I'm half Korean and half white. So, but I'm very comfortable writing East Asian American characters, right?
Mm.
But Lilo and Stitch features Native Hawaiian characters,
Mm.
and I felt like I was kind of familiar with that, but I'm not from that community, and so I
Right.
wanted to make sure we had a cultural advisor,
Mm.
somebody else on board who was going to help us out, and we got this amazing writer named Moana McAdams, who
Mm.
is a children's book author and she's been our cultural consultant and developmental editor on the book, and it's been amazing. So I'm really thrilled about the way we've been able to put the book together. And Julia Giacomino is drawing. She's an Italian artist, and it's just gorgeous, fun, vibrant stuff. And
Mm.
she's also coloring. And then Jeff Ecclesbury is the letterer. So it's been a good fun time.
I know issue one looks great, reads
Thank
great.
you.
It's funny. I mean, with Dynamite getting this Disney license, we're getting a lot of stuff right now. We got a Scar series, and Cruella de Vil had a mini series. Maleficent had one, and it's kind of like mileage varies on how well you can tolerate, more iterations of the Disney characters. Like I remember Aladdin had the animated series. Like it seemed like everything had animated series. One
Yeah.
of the ones that I liked the most was the Lilo and Stitch animated series, where it was like Stitch was experiment 626. And so the whole premise of the show is, well, what happened to the other experiments leading up to him? And so every episode is like trying to capture some loose alien experiment. And it was just hijinks ensue. And it was fun. It was just really fun. Um, but there's something about the Lilo and Stitch property that does just sort of last. Like my kids love it. My wife is a huge Stitch fan of all
Yeah.
things. Like her iPhone case is Stitch. And she's got this Dooney and Burke purse we found at a pawn shop with all the Disney characters on it. She put a little Stitch charm on it. There's something about, I guess, just the sort of idea of family, whether, it's found family. I mean, Lilo and Nani, they kind of go through, some sort of trauma. We kind of see it. We don't really
Yeah.
see it ever, but you get the sense that whatever happened made them super close, and they are all that each other has. And, as this book picks up, we've got a sort of extended family even around them. But family is such a central theme of the Lilo and Stitch franchise. And I imagine that would draw anybody to that sort of property.
Yeah. I mean, the big Hawaiian word that the book teaches is ohana. I mean, the movie teaches is
Mhm.
ohana. Ohana means family. Family means
Right.
nobody gets left behind. It's really powerful. I agree. It's a kind of universal, powerful thing. I think going hand in hand with that is the fact that Lilo and Stitch are they're really screwed up. You know what I mean? They're really impulsive. They can't control
Mhm.
themselves. They've got, they act out. They're well-meaning. They've got good hearts, but they got a lot of unresolved issues. And that makes them really sympathetic. You're really rooting for them, and the fact that they come together and sort of try to figure things out together is really fun and moving.
Right.
So it's also kind of funny because, like that sort of universal theme of not quite being in control,
Mhm.
like that's really compelling. And I think it's incredibly compelling for kids because little kids, I mean, that's the state of existence for little kids is that you don't know why you feel the way you do. And
Mhm.
frankly, adults aren't much better. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, in a funny way. I mean, not in a funny way at all, but I mean, like we live in harrowing times,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of us have, we've been struggling a lot, and so seeing characters who struggle in this kind of way is always helpful and useful and compelling. I mean, it's like I said, I'm sort of best known for writing the Hulk and Darth Vader, and you kind of think that's about as far from a Disney kids show as you can get, but. Stitch is, he was built to destroy. You know what I mean? Like he was literally built to destroy. That's his function. And so there's some stuff that's really similar between his struggles and the Hulk struggles, for example. So it is funny. Like these projects sort of come together at the right time, and sort of like what you've done before has kind of prepped you for it. You know what I mean? And like the themes you've played with, you get to play with them again in different kinds of ways, and it feels like a good match. I'm happy to be here.
No, it's definitely fun. Now that you've drawn the through line, I can clearly see, right? Stitch, Darth Vader, the Hulk, three guys with bad tempers, who can get real ugly in the wrong light.
Yeah, they all have anger issues, they have impulse control issues,
Right.
So there's something to that.
For sure. So Lilo and Stitch, as we record this, Lilo and Stitch #1 is already out.
Yes.
And I've got my copy right here. We'll show them off. I love this book. Basically, you don't have to have seen Lilo and Stitch to read this book, although why not watch Lilo and Stitch? But it's not done in like the sort of hand wavy way where it's like, hey, here's what happened and now let's read the book. But you very quickly get introduced to Stitch as well as Lilo and how we got to where we are and what things are like. And then we get thrust into a new adventure. And I guess not to spoil, I don't know how much you can spoil anything in an issue 1. But I don't know. Let's just say it's Lilo and Stitch meets Home Alone. And where did the concept or the premise for this series come from?
Well, it's funny because at the very beginning, it was pitched to me as a Stitch book, and because I think that was the idea. It was going to focus on Stitch, so the first thought was, okay, let's put Stitch on some kind of cross country adventure where for whatever reason he has to, he's pulled away from home. I mean, we're still playing with that theme Ohana, right? So, like he's trying to get back home, right? And that's still the kind of basic structure we're using. But what was kind of great about it is that, as I was working on the outlines and stuff, our contacts at Disney were like, this is great. And hey, you know what? You could use Lilo more. You know what I mean? So we were like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. So it was fantastic. You know what I mean? We really got to kind of dig even deeper into all those themes and really, make it what it should be. And so the basic premise is that and then the other sort of thing that we kind of set out for ourselves is we didn't want to just repeat the same beats as the movie. You know what I mean? At the end of the movie, so the movie, spoiler alert, but in the movie, Stitch is this alien who escapes the Galactic Federation. He ends up on Earth. There are other aliens coming to get him. The reason they're coming to get him is because he's basically a bioweapon built for destruction, right? But through all of these hijinks, he ends up bonding with Lilo, and the two of them, and with this little family on Kauai and Hawaii, and he basically learns what it is to be part of a family, and the two of them learn how to sort of they get a better grip on life with each other, right? And with this sort of extended group of characters. So in doing the comic, we didn't want to sort of throw that all out and redo that story. You know what I mean? So it's like a very and also some of that stuff had already been played with. Like there's a Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch, which was I think it was only released on video, but it was a sequel. And in that, Stitch kind of reverts to his sort of savage form, if you will. And so we didn't want to, and that is I mean, that's a very kind of natural story to occur to anybody, because you got this character who is built for destruction. Let's play with that.
Right.
But we didn't want to do that again. So instead, the idea is that he's been separated from the family, but now but he's not turning back into some kind of savage monster. Instead, the stress comes around the fact that these alien robots who are incredibly mild-mannered but want to take over the galaxy want to get his DNA so that they can make themselves more aggressive,
right?
So that they can destroy things better. But Stitch realizes that because these implacable robots are coming after him, if he's around Lilo, he puts Lilo in danger. So he's trying to take care of her by separating himself from her. So we get that conflict, and we get to play with the same themes, but it's not Stitch sort of regressing. You know what I mean? And we actually get to take the next step in terms of emotion and theme. And one of the cool things, and Moana was a huge help with all of this, was we introduced sort of a sort of another sort of complementary Hawaiian native Hawaiian word and theme, which is kuleana. So you've got ohana, which is family. Kuleana is a word. It means a lot of different things, but kuleana, I mean, one of the sort of basic translations is responsibility. And it's sort of like we've got, it's sort of, as you grow up in your family and in your community, you have a responsibility to your family and to your community and to the environment as a whole, all of these things. And so that's something that Lilo and Stitch are both learning about during the course of this storyline. It's sort of another theme that's working in here. And anyway, so that's a long-winded answer to all that. But it's been it's been pretty cool.
Nice. And so Lilo and Stitch is 4 issues or 5?
Oh, well, I don't know that we've announced how many issues it is. It's longer than that. We've got more plans.
Nice.
Our first story arc, I think, is 4, but it's, so keep on buying and we'll keep on making it.
Nice. I'm excited about that. So Lilo and Stitch is out in stores right now. So you can call your LCS and go ahead and order it, or, buy it online. Just buy the book. It's a great book. So we've talked about the present and I guess even a little bit of the future, right? Now we get to, time travel a little bit. I'm curious to know when you knew you wanted to be a writer, and then when you decided comics would be your medium of choice.
Well, it's kind of funny. I've done a lot of different things, or did a lot, took a lot of different steps along the way, and did a lot, it seemed like I was going in a lot of different directions. But if you go all the way back, one of the very first things I was ever doing was drawing and writing comics. I mean, I found a thing in my parents' house a little while back. It was like one of the first comics I ever drew. It was about a dragon that went electric, and that's about it. That was the whole story. But I drew these pictures, and my mom wrote captions underneath. It was kind of amazing. But that was when I was like 5 or 6, and my mom was the kind of mom who bought us paper and crayons and markers, and she didn't buy us coloring books. She hated coloring books. So I grew up drawing, and also grew up writing stories and doing all kinds of stuff. In high school, I was like, I worked on the paper, I did theater, I did black and white photography. I'm still obsessed with photography. I've got all these. This is actually my old high school camera right here that I recently got fixed, and I've been shooting again. And I thought I was going to be a writer. I went to college, and and I was also drawing cartoons for my school newspaper. I went to college, I drew cartoons for some of the papers there, and I did photography for papers, and I did improv comedy, did all kinds of stuff. But somehow along the way, I let myself stop thinking about writing or storytelling as a career. And instead I was, I studied political science. At the same time, I was writing fiction and doing all this stuff. But I ended up going back home to Texas, and I worked on Ann Richards' campaign when she was running for governor back in 1990.
Mm.
And I thought I was going to go into politics. I got a Rhodes Scholarship. I went to Oxford to study history with the idea that that would make me a better politician in the end.
Right.
But I finally got the chance to work on films, like
Mm.
with a student film group when I was there, and it was like, this is really what I need to do. And
Mm.
so I went to film school. I went to NYU for film school, made a bunch of short films, made a movie called Robot Stories, independent movie, and then I got my agent got me a meeting with Marvel, and I started writing comics,
Mm.
and I've been doing it for 20 years. Actually, just about exactly 20 years now. It's kind of crazy. It was about 20 years ago that I started with Marvel, and I've been doing it ever since.
Man, man, that is awesome. Your story sounds a bit like Dwayne McDuffie's story,
Oh yeah,
right? Like he's trying to be a physicist, trying to be an astronaut, uh, gets really far in that field, and then it's just like, kind of disenchanted. Let me go to film school, and then ends up with an amazing career in comics and animation. I wonder what it is about like people that sort of unlock the creativity, or it's not so much that you unlock it late because you're creative, like you're born creative, and
yeah.
then for whatever
Everybody's born
reason,
creative. Yeah.
right, for whatever reason you suppress it, and then just like one day you wake up and you're like, actually, no, I'm gonna start a podcast or start taking photos or something.
I think there's, I mean, for me, there's two things. I mean, I grew up in a very white neighborhood,
Mm.
and the kids I knew were great, but I encountered a lot of racism from other random kids and all this kind of
Mm.
stuff growing up. And I just always knew that storytelling was going to be part of how I survived in this world. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Being able to tell my story, being able to communicate with people. Um, and I also, I mean, I think there was also I didn't sort of process this all intellectually at the time, but later on I did. And
Mm.
it's this notion that you can argue with people, but people don't change their minds because of argument. I mean, some people do. Some very rare
Mm.
people can kind of listen to reason and be like, "Oh, that actually makes sense, and I should
Mm.
change the way I do things because of that." Most people have, like they've got their way of doing things. They've got their things that they know, and arguing with them will never change that. Instead, people change because of emotional experience.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, people don't, stop being homophobic because
Mm.
you quote statistics at them. They stop being homophobic. I mean, not that a lot of people never stop being homophobic or whatever. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
some people will stop. Will find a way to change their hearts because they discover that somebody they love is gay or something like that. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like that.
Yeah.
Like this is the way biases shift because
Yeah.
of actual personal experience. So I was working in politics, but then so I was working in politics. One of the reasons I was working in politics is because I cared about this stuff because I want people to get along. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
want a
Yeah.
world in which people's rights are respected and we respect each other as human beings and et cetera, et cetera. Uh, and politics is really, really important for that.
Mm.
But I think I kind of realized that the sort of traditional route of politicking doesn't change people's minds. What changes people's minds is stories, is either
Yeah.
actual real experience or stories, and
Right.
stories are sort of the next best thing. I mean, early on in film school, I was making all these short films that had Asian American characters, right?
Mm.
Because that was a big, representation. That was a big part of what was important to me. And I would send these things out to film festivals apply to film festivals all around the country. I was sending and I was really thrilled when my film got into the Arizona Film Festival, some in Sedona, Arizona, or something like that. And
Mm.
a friend of mine was like, "Why are you spending $30 to enter your film in that festival? Like, no one from the industry is ever going to see that. That's not going to." And I was like, "Because I want people in Sedona who
Mm.
may not have any Asian friends or neighbors to see non-stereotypical Asian people on the screen." You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's kind of part of that mission, right? And so that's one thing is that some of the same impulses that drove me to politics and story, some of those impulses are the same, driving me to both things. But I think on a real personal level as well, it's just that when I was working in politics, it was like, okay, this is good. I'm doing good work here, but there's a lot of people who could be sitting in this chair doing what I'm doing right now,
Yeah.
but there's like no one else is going to tell the stories I'm going to tell.
Yeah.
Like there are certain stories that I've got in me and things that I wanted to do, and I don't know. I mean, it's just I was lucky enough to be able to get into NYU and also just to do stuff with with the Oxford University Film Foundation, which was that student film group at Oxford, and the lights went on. It's like this is what I need to do, and that's and I've been fortunate to be able to do it. So.
Absolutely. And you've been able to do it with some of like the biggest properties in comics. Like I said, I mean, you've worked on Hulk, you've worked on Darth Vader. I mean, I'm just going through your list here. I mean, pretty much anyone you could think of, like you've worked on these characters. What does it feel like for you? Or, I mean, Batman, Superman, Hercules, Teen Titans, like just everyone. What does it mean to you to sort of shepherd these properties, and why? What is it that's satisfying about being able to tell stories with these properties that are so well known?
Well, it's just fun. You know what I mean? Like all of us, I grew up reading these comics and, thinking about these characters and, walking down the street and clenching my fists and thinking about Wolverine's claws springing out and all this. You know what I mean? Like that's just, so it's kind of wild. I mean, every few days I have to kind of, pinch myself that I'm actually writing stories, getting paid to write stories about stuff that I was, ludicrously obsessed with when I was 10, I'm writing Star Wars books, you know what I mean? Like in continuity Darth Vader stories. Like that's kind of unfathomable. So that's really cool. I think, I mean, I feel, I mean, there's a couple of different things I feel about it, I guess. One is that it's just incredibly fun. Two is that it is a huge challenge, you know what I mean? Because what you're trying to do is tell stories that fit into the existing continuity, that don't break the characters, but that still matter, that still feel essential, that still are bringing something new to it. And very often basically the challenge is to find some little spot where the character can change within this space, but where you can have a story with an emotional core that means something, and I've been very fortunate in that I've worked with great editors and great licensors, and they've given me this, just enough wiggle room. You know what I mean? Like with the Darth Vader books, we're exploring this moment between Empire and Return of the Jedi. We think of that moment all the time as from Luke's point of view, because at the end of Empire, Luke discovers Vader is his father, and that's this horrifying thing, and that's so much emotional weight to that, But think about that from Vader's point of view. Like Vader in that moment is reaching out to Luke, and he says, "Come with me." I don't. He's like, like he basically offers Luke the chance to join him to overthrow the Empire, the Emperor, and bring order to the Empire. Like Vader's really putting himself out there, and Luke rejects him the same way Padme rejected him at the end of Return of Revenge of the Sith. You know what I mean? And so we got the green light to explore that whole emotional moment from Vader's point of view, which hadn't really been done in this kind of a way before. That's incredible. You know what I mean? And so you give me that kind of wiggle room, and then on top of that, they gave us. I was like, I got to get a character in there because we couldn't use Luke, because Luke and Vader can't really interact that much during that time, right? Because you can't detract from the big moment in Return of the Jedi, right? So you can't just have a bunch of stuff with Luke and Vader. But I needed to have a character that was really going to resonate. And I was like, who's left? Who could that be? It's like Padme's gone, and I was like, Padme had all these handmaidens, and so I pitched bringing Sabe back. And they greenlit it. They were like, yeah, do it. So, and because Sabe she looks like Padme, and she's like, she has the she knows, she eventually, figures out that oh, well, I won't spoil it all, but like that. So they not only let us explore this whole thing from Vader's point of view, but they let me use characters that were really gonna matter and
Yeah.
really dig deep and add something really emotional to this whole thing. So that's solid gold. When you can do that kind of stuff, with the Hulk too, with Planet Hulk, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like that was, when I was working on that story, I literally wrote this down on a piece of paper and stuck it on my computer, and it said, monster to hero,
Mm.
like, and that was the arc of that story. And that's a huge, big, juicy emotional story to dig into. So, like finding those kinds of arcs means that you really, like you feel like you haven't just treaded water. You've actually been able to bring something to it, and that's what matters, I think. The I mean, in this kind of funny way with the Firefly book, I don't want to spoil this too much, but I wrote a 36 issues of a Firefly comic book for Boom.
Mm.
And one of the big ongoing things was like, when is, like, I mean, we were kind of teasing this throughout the whole thing, but it was like, man, Mal really needs to go to therapy. Like, this guy's got all these unresolved issues, and
Mm.
I don't want to spoil too much, but that paid off. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
being able to like pay off some big things like that is, it's, there's nothing better than that. So that's one huge thing, is being able to add something, something to these storylines, and
Mm.
take these characters to another level. I mean, I also love the chance to add stuff to these worlds that hasn't been there before, in terms of diverse casts and new characters. Like, one of the greatest feelings I've had is introducing Amadeus characters like Amadeus Cho,
Mm.
co-created with Tak Miyazawa, to the Marvel universe.
Hmm.
Wave is another big character. She's one of Marvel's only Filipino heroines, and
Mm.
Lineal Yu and I co-created her back when we were doing the Agents of Atlas book, and so having the chance to do characters like that. Also, I wrote the Magneto Testament book. Warren
Mm.
Simons, the editor, brought me on that, which is basically the story of a German Jewish kid who is trying to save his family from the Holocaust. It's
Mm.
it's a origin story of Magneto, but it has no superhero stuff in it at all. Really, it's historical fiction, and that, like doing stuff like that in the Marvel universe, in these, with these big pop culture franchises, is kind of amazing.
Mm.
Like, we did I did a book. It was also edited by Nate Cosby for Dynamite. It was a James Bond book,
Hmm.
and the big pitch was, we were going to make Odd Job sexy. Odd Job was a Korean villain
Mm.
in the original Bond books and movies, and I years ago I'd read this Maxine Hong Kingston book where she was talking about Odd Job, and it was like Odd Job's sort of this joke. She's got this Asian American character thinking about Odd Job, and he's like, no, Odd Job should, you put a face on screen, on the
Mm.
giant screen, for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30. You can make anybody fall in love with that face. And Odd Job should be, this hero. Like, people should fall in love with him. I should learn how to walk and hold my body watching this incredible hero and all this. And I was like,
Mm.
let's do that. Let's do that in the comics. Let's make Odd Job hot. And we made him this great, like, he's not a joke. He's a really fun, cocky, antagonist and later partner to Bond.
Mm.
We kind of built it like a romantic comedy where they drive each other crazy and then they team up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so having the chance to do that kind of stuff, I got to write a Storm book. I got to write a War Machine book. Like, it's something special being able to do something a little more, raise the profile of some of these characters. Not that these characters necessarily need me to raise their profile, but to help make the, like, people talk about Marvel, the world outside your window. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah,
Let's do that for real.
for sure. So weaving in and out of like all these historic franchises, huge properties and characters, right? You're you, no matter what you're writing, and your sort of portfolio is widely, it's eclectic. Like you've got cookbooks, you've got a little bit of everything. what is it that you feel like you sort of bring or maybe even leave with every project, no matter what it is?
That's a really good question. I'd be curious to hear what you think. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So, and I'm newer to all this, right? That's kind of the whole stick is I'm new to comics and I get
Oh,
to
okay,
learn
cool.
about it by talking to the creators, right? But just through the few things I've read of yours, I was saving this one, right? Uh, Duo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Duo is a series I like a lot. And then I spent most of the day yesterday just trying like blasting through as much of Planet Hulk as I could,
Oh, cool.
right? And there, this thing, like what I loved about the beginning of Planet Hulk is like the meeting of the Illuminati to decide, right, to ship Hulk off to some far off planet. And it's just like the sort of the politics of superheroism. And just the sort of like, okay, well, what's the greatest good? Like, and what I love is that you call out the irony, you call out sort of grandstanding and placating. Namor is the voice of reason of all people. Um, so there's that, right? There's just the sort of what I don't know. It just feels very human, right? Like when people pitch Planet Hulk, it's like, oh, it's Gladiator, but with the Hulk. And like, maybe because I never watched Gladiator, I was like, okay, I'm just thinking just big action pieces, right? But when I'm drilling down into it, I'm like, oh no, this is like just very human. Like we're making tough decisions, right? From Hulk's side, it's like, okay, you betrayed me, right? And you're dealing with like this betrayal and the anger that, rightfully you feel afterwards, right? Um, and so it's just very emotional isn't the word, but it has a deeper emotional core than you might think, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
I
so
think,
then go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad you're getting that kind of stuff because I mean, that's one of the things I guess I would have said too. Although I think maybe you may have, when you're talking about Namor, I think that you may be reading the, Bendis's, because Bendis did a thing where he really delved deep into all the Illuminati, those so-called heroes debating,
Mm,
sending the Hulk into space. I think in Planet Hulk itself, I don't remember if actually we just had a few pages at the very beginning, but still, but like those themes and all of
mm,
that, like, um, I mean, that is, you touched on two things that are things that I think matter to me that I think
mm,
I try to bring to everyone. One is, I mean, when you talk about, different perspectives on, characters making these kinds of decisions in, all the shades of gray of that.
mm,
I think that's definitely something I try to explore. I think in most of these books I'm looking at, or in a lot of these books anyway, I'm looking at how power works, and
mm,
how coercion and like the kind of power dynamics between people and between authority, and what kind of right people have to impose their will on other people, what kind of responsibilities people have to each other, that kind of which is basically politics, right? You know what I mean?
right,
That's the
right.
sort of dirty word for all of that. But I think that's really important. You know what I mean? I mean, I've always another way to kind of look at that is that I tend to write books about underdogs. It's kind of
Mm,
funny to think of Hulk as an underdog, but Hulk because he's the strongest one there is, but
right.
he's certainly an underdog in terms of everybody else kind of hating him and teaming up
Mm,
against him all the time. Um, so that kind of power structure stuff is
mm,
always, somewhere in the back of my head, I think, when I'm writing these stories. Uh, uh, I mean, a lot of superhero stories are about justice in some way or the other, and
right.
so that's part of it. Um, and then when you talk about emotion, that's a huge part of it. Like I always talk. I mean, back in the day when I was making that movie Robot Stories, people would ask me what kind of stuff do you do, and I would say I like to combine fun genre stuff with
Mm,
real emotional stories. You know what
yeah.
I mean? Like that was sort of my dealio. I mean, the Duo book you're holding there is kind of the epitome of
Yes.
the way. Like
Yes.
the a wild sci-fi story about,
Mm.
two lovers who are basically trapped in one body, in one
Mhm.
mind. And it asks the question of like, how would you, what would it be like if you could hear and see and feel every single thing that your partner ever saw or thought or felt. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, would that drive, what would that do to your relationship?
Right.
Um,
And
well,
I think
so
that
it's,
one,
sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, I think that one maybe hit different for me just because I'm married, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like this idea, one of the all right, so duo. I'm gonna explain the basic premise. And I'm gonna try not to spoil things
Yeah.
because, go read the book. But Duo is kind of a fresh take on Zombie, which
Yes.
was a character that had debuted during the OG Milestone run in the 90s, where it was super like supernatural back then. This run is a lot more. This take is a lot more scientific, but
Yeah.
this guy, Dr. David Kim, is a scientist along with his, I believe, fiance. I don't believe they're married in the book.
Yeah, they're not married yet. Yeah, I think they are. Yeah, you're right. They're fiance.
So his fiance Kelly, they're working on this just incredible, nanite technology together. There's an accident in the lab, or was it an accident? I don't know. Right. But because of this accident, right, the nanites basically take over to save them both. But the way they do that is by basically killing Kelly, but not really killing her, just kind of just doing away with her body. And her consciousness is now in David's body. So they are one body and technically one mind. They share each other's thoughts and emotions and stuff. There's a really funny scene where they're basically at Kelly's funeral, and this lady's kind of comes on to David, and she's like, "Yeah, I could tell, like, you were excited just then, like whatever." And so this idea that, like, okay, well, what if your spouse or your partner could see and feel your every thought and impulse, but then as the series goes on, of course, they're trying to figure out what happened to themselves, and we kind of meet a few different figures. We meet two different sort of sets of people who were trying to either take advantage of the technology or use them for one reason or another. And David and Kelly are not in agreement as to, like, well, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? What should we do? And what's cool about it is, like, either of them can sort of take control of the body that they share at any time. And so the story ends up sort of being like, well, how do you come to a compromise in a relationship? Like, how do you decide when do I, let her lead or let him take the lead? Or when do I just say, no, I'm making the best decision for our family right now? And how do you sort of defend that decision in like an impulse or in an instant, like a life-changing moment? And I don't know, that story just really resonated with me. Like I said, probably because I'm a family man. But just the way it was done was just so awesome to me.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. It was a lot of fun to work on that book. Reggie Hudlin and Dennis Cohen basically came to me, and they sort of pitched this idea of
Mm.
like you say, it's a revamp of the zombie a concept from John Rossum and Dennis
Mm.
back in the day. But they had this idea of this basic idea of the two people trapped in one body, and I was like, that's like you're coming to me with a big sci-fi thing that also has this amazing emotional hook,
Hmm.
like lots of fun stuff to explore. Let's do it. So Khoi Pham did the art.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's I guess that's I guess that's kind of my bread and butter, being able to explore that kind of, those kind of stories, try to dig a little deep, and find out what's going on with people's hearts. I
Right.
did another book for DC called City Boy, and the
Hmm.
big high concept is that it's a kid who can, he basically can look into the infrastructure of a city and see how it
Hmm.
lives and breathes and connects, and kind of like look through its history and find things that are lost. Do all these, like, he connects to cities in these kinds of ways, even like control the infrastructure to a certain point. But fundamentally, it's about a kid who, like, basically an abused kid who's trying to find his mom, who's
Hmm.
been long lost, and then grappling with loss and trauma. So again, like, having editors who are really supportive of digging deep. That's what makes this all work. So it's been fun.
Man, no, that's awesome. Now, just um, I met Koi Fam about a year ago
Oh yeah.
at a con, and he told me that the duo book was done like ages before it came out, like as early as like 2015.
Yeah, it was a little crazy.
What is it like writing a book like that and then just kind of having to sit on it for as long as you did?
It's funny because that's just the way things are in a lot of
Mm,
different industries. In the film industry, you can write a script and it can take 10 or 20 years to get it made.
mm,
In the prose world, traditional publishing, people turn in books and it can be like a year and a half or 2 years before it comes out. But in comics, we're just used to stuff happening fast. You know what I mean?
right.
Like you write a script, immediately an artist is working on it. You're seeing pages within a few days. That book is on shelves in 6 weeks, or well, maybe not quite that fast, but the book is on shelves in a couple of months. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
that's it. Things move fast. So we did something like four and a half of the 6 issues, and a couple of different things happened. The sort of the publishing schedule for the milestone books was kind of in flux, and they were kind of figuring out the best time to launch it. And so
mm,
we kind of were on hold for a little while, and then the pandemic hit,
yeah.
and stuff got delayed. But then actually, a little bit into the pandemic, we were like, let's finish this thing.
Mm,
But at that point, we were going back, and you know, I had to write the last script,
mm,
and I kind of had to go back and look at everything again and kind of remind myself of what all the beats were and where all because I've probably written 100 comic books since the point that that we did that.
right.
So there was a lot to kind of remind myself of, and then, but it was amazing because we got to kind of revisit it. And one of the big things was, like as we were doing this, I was like, you know what? We really need 2 pages at the beginning of the very first issue. We need to add 2 pages there if we can, just to kind
Mm,
of get into these characters on a pure emotional level.
right.
Like we need to start with them in bed. This is a love story.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
we need to see that bond right away,
Mm,
and feel that, and then introduce the conflict and themes. But we got to feel that, and at that, and so it. But if these things had just come out when they were supposed to come out, I wouldn't have had that time for reflection. You know what I mean? And
right.
so we wouldn't have been able to add that nuance there. Um, and thankfully, our the editor was really totally got that, and we found a way to make it work. I think I took 2 pages out of one of the later issues,
Mm,
and so budget wise, it could all work out. And it just it's I don't know if every reader, I mean, of course you wouldn't notice it because you don't know, you didn't see it before, but without those pages, but they make that kind of thing can make a huge difference. And
yeah.
and just so yeah, the experience was pretty cool. It was a pretty great experience.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Those 2 pages definitely set the tone for what you're gonna get
yeah.
for sure. Are there any plans to return back to that character or
I,
just
like
characters?
I mean, nothing immediate, but I
Mm,
have talked to some folks, so knock on wood that we might eventually be able to do it someday. We'll see.
that's that was one of the highlights of the season one of the Milestone
Oh,
Returns
thanks.
line. Um, so I I told our community that I was gonna interview you, and the questions just came pouring in. So
Oh, wow.
know that you are you are loved.
Oh,
Um, so I'm just gonna kind of pick some of these at random, right?
okay.
So uh, Tyler says, Incredible Hulk 611, probably my favorite Hulk issue of all time. The payoff in the Bruce Scar fight. Everything has been leading to this, into a tearful ending of a father and son. What was the inspiration to drive home that father son moment?
Wow. Well, I mean, from the beginning, when we had this idea of introducing a son of Hulk,
Mm,
like there was going to be, you know, big conflict and then, and then some kind of resolution. But, um, I mean, a lot of that inspiration comes from work of previous Hulk writers, including Bill Mantlo and Peter David.
mm,
I think it was Bill Mantlo who introduced the idea that Bruce was basically an abused kid. You know, that his father was violent and abused his kid and his mom. And well, actually, am I remembering this right? He killed his mom. And then Peter David picked that up again and did a story in which Banner accidentally, like, attacked by his father. He kicks back at him, and Banner's father falls and cracks his head on. He cracks his head on the mother's gravestone, I think. So Banner actually kills his own father, by accident. But so it's this whole horrible trauma thing about. I mean, the whole Crossroads story. In the end, you realize is this whole that Mantlo did. I don't want to spoil it, but the whole thing, the big reveal of this big crazy sci-fi story is that it's all tied to childhood trauma. So I was going on this notion of Bruce and the Hulk grappling with that, and the grappling with responsibility of having a son of his own, and of finding out what that to see if these two can find each other. Scar, Scar's story is also a story of trauma. I mean, the Hulk doesn't know that he exists. The Hulk thinks that Scar, that his unborn child was killed when Crown City was destroyed at the end of Planet Hulk. But Scar, being a son of Hulk, survived. As a and sort of was born in fire, basically, when his mother died, and he grows up sort of Tarzan style almost among the monsters in the swamps, the fire swamps, basically, and sort of becomes this barbarian warrior, but he always he hates his father, wants to kill his father. He comes to Earth to kill his father. That's how the story sets it all up. But those are, those are themes that are throughout the Hulk. I mean, the big theme is anger. Where does that anger come from? Where do we derive those, all of that, and those family stories become really critical to explore, when you're really going to explore that deeply. So that's where that came from. I've had a lot of, there's been a lot of people who've told me those stories mean a lot to them, and I'm really moved by that. The Paul Pelletier drew that issue, and there's a splash page at the end where you finally see Banner embrace this kid, or I can't remember if it's Banner or it's the Hulk who's embracing the kid in that moment. But and I think it's Banner. I think it's Banner and the kid are embracing, and then you see sort of these sort of ghostly figures of Scar and the Hulk, above them. But that kind of that moment killed me. You know what I mean? Like it's and Paul just drew it so incredibly well.
Sure.
So thank you to Tyler for asking that question.
Yes. Now you spent a lot of time on the Hulk. Obviously, nobody writes stuff. Well, I shouldn't say obviously, and I shouldn't say nobody, right? But typically, if you're writing a character for that long, it's because you enjoy writing that character, right? What kept you on the Hulk for so long?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's some characters. Well, like I seem very calm, and I hope I seem pretty calm and collected. But
right.
I'm an angry person. You know what I mean? I'm very angry deep inside. Right. Not even deep inside, just right on the surface. And so, that character has always made sense to me. The character, I've always loved that character. I mean, I loved that character back in the day, when the Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno show was on. That was my favorite show. Yeah. It introduced me to the literary concept of tragedy. I'm not even kidding. It was one of the first things that I watched as a kid that was like, did not have a happy ending every time. You know what I mean? It was like, wow, this is hardcore. This is deep. But that, that theme of anger played out in so many different ways. And also, frankly, the theme of family. Here we are. This is another connection to Lilo and Stitch, the Ohana thing, right? But that's, I mean, the Hulk, the Hulk always says, he just wants to be left alone. But there are few other Marvel characters that have as many family members as part of their extended cast as the Hulk. You know what I mean? Right. Like, and it's really, just an ongoing thing, the Hulk family. So, so that all of that stuff is just really powerful to me. So, and I felt it was like, there was just infinitely more stuff to do with it. So I had a good run there. I mean, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I mean, I worked on a few characters that I felt like I just kind of got like that. Like the Clark Kent is one too. Like the Clark Kent and Superman, loved working on those books. Vader, like working on the Vader book. It's similar kind of stuff. There's a person with a lot of issues, also related to family. Yeah, no, there's some characters. I think there's also something about the Hulk and Vader, and also like Captain Adama, which was a character from Battlestar Galactica. I wrote that Battlestar Galactica series, but I remember these characters are also all interesting to me because they don't talk too much. You know what I mean? They say other people in the book do most of the talking. Right. They do a lot less. So, but that there are a lot of people in my family. Like my grandparents on both sides, both my white grandparents and my Korean grandparents were very taciturn people, really. And so, like kind of realizing that you're sort of reading between lines, you sort of grow up learning to listen for stuff that's not said and understand things through other ways, and also understand what those, the value or the importance of just the few words you do hear, like that's that kind of expression makes a lot of sense to me. It's always interesting to me to write. So I think those are another reason why some of those characters resonate with me.
Got you. Now, Tyler also wants to know, says, what's it like seeing a book you created, Met Cadet U, being turned into an animated series for Netflix?
It's a trip, like that's, on a sheer business level, that's kind of the dream, right? We're doing work for hire stuff, to make that paycheck, pay rent, keep feeding our families. And, but we do create our own stuff in hopes that it can have another life and bring in some checks down the line. And, I didn't get rich, but it was, on a business level, that's sort of the plan. And that was great. Very exciting. And then it's also just it's an incredible thrill to have something that you poured your heart and soul into become something that other people are interested in, and that can breathe new life into it and take it in another direction and do new things and take it to new audiences. It was wild.
Yeah, no, it's definitely cool. Well, I can imagine it's cool to see, anything that you create have another life, right? Like, it's funny, right? The whole, all the buzz is that, DC sort of sucks at live action movies, but their animated universe is great. And Marvel is the inverse of that, with the one huge exception being the Planet Hulk animated film. And, I watched it.
I thought they did a great job on that. Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know, that the monster to hero, right? Like that arc, I think is just it's powerful. I guess in any medium, it's powerful, right? But you've seen the Planet Hulk story sort of adapted in animation, and then it shows up again in Ragnarok. What is it like seeing Gladiator Hulk so many times in so many different perspectives?
It's great. It's kind of there's a few sort of like weird moments, like when they came out with a big action figure of that, that character. It is. I think one of the trippiest things was when they made one of those sculptures. What do they call them, maquettes or whatever? Like
the big statues.
Those statues. So they made a statue of that Ladrone cover, which shows the Hulk battling the Silver Savage, which was the Silver Surfer in Gladiator gear. That, for some reason, and I should have bought one, but I didn't have the scratch at the time, and I didn't, but I remember seeing pictures of that, and I was like, holy cow, because I had done a little sketch, to send to Ladrone of the Silver Savage, of like, this is what he might look like. And I give him a loincloth and, this the obedience disc, and he's using his board as a shield, and he's got a mace or something, and so he took that, and he did an incredible version of it, did an incredible cover, and then Carlo Pagulan drew the hell out of that in the interiors of the book, and then they made this physical object. You know what I mean? And that it's just weird when you see that kind of a thing, and like that started as just like this almost random thought in my head of like let's make the Silver Savage, put him in put the Silver Surfer in the gladiator ring and make him use his shield, his board as a shield. That'll be awesome. And it was awesome. And then they made it. They made it. Like they actually made it. That kind of stuff is weird. You know what I mean? It's wild. It's cool.
For sure. It's awesome. All right. And then one last question. This comes from Vire. And so, the question really is just, how is it working on like these big licensed properties? But a deeper question really is maybe what's the difference between working with like just sort of standard Marvel DC fare and then working on Star Wars? Oh,
well, it's kind of very similar in a lot of ways. I mean, one difference, actually the biggest, I mean, the process of like figuring out good stories and making the comics is the same. You know what I mean? It's just, we're all just trying to tell the best stories we can, figure out the visual storytelling, figure out the story beats, make it sing, make it matter. Make the deadlines, you know what I mean? Like, but in terms of like the practical work, or one of the interesting creative things going on is that so when I work on a Marvel comic book, it needs to fit into the continuity of Marvel Comics, which is all in-house, basically. You know what I mean? So, like the editors, like make sure that if we're going to use, like I'm working on this Shang-Chi book that ties into the Gang War storyline. So it's like, so all that stuff gets run by Nick Lowe and we make sure that, when She-Hulk shows up in here, it syncs well with the way she's working in the rest of the storyline, all that kind of stuff. Right. And that all happens in-house, but, and certainly, like you're aware of what's happening in the movies, but, and the TV shows, but that doesn't have to be reflected in the comics exactly. You know what I mean? Like, like it doesn't have to fit into all of that continuity. But with the Star Wars stuff, all of these comics fit into the continuity. They are considered in continuity with all of the movies, all of the TV shows, all of the games, everything that's out there. I mean, there is a cutoff point. Like, there was a certain point when they were like, okay, this stuff is Star Wars Legends. Right. That stuff is all out of continuity. And from this point on, it's all in continuity. Yeah. And so we're in the in continuity phase. And so we're working with folks at Lucasfilm, who are amazing. I have no idea how they keep this all in their heads, but so they have to, everything has to go through them, and we have to make sure, that we're not stepping on anybody's toes or that we aren't doing anything that, contradicts anything. So that's, like those books have to be done much more ahead of time because they have to go through a whole approval process. The scripts have to be written way ahead of time. And it can be challenging, but there's some really sweet payoffs to that. You know what I mean? Like there's something really special when you're, I'm writing literally one of the top 10 figures in pop culture right now. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like Darth Vader is like one of the all-time top 10 characters, I think, of modern pop culture. It's like, who else is up there? It's like, you know what I mean? Right. Like it's really astounding, certainly among villains,
there's only a few, right? You can't walk into a Target without seeing a Darth Vader. He's on a pillow, he's on a toy, he's on mugs, like.
So being able to write stories that are part of the sort of like official biography or storyline of this character and this whole thing it's mind-blowing, and it also means that these books, hopefully the stakes feel real, I think, hopefully for readers, you know what I mean? Like every story should feel like an event because they're doing things that haven't been done. So that's, it is hard, what I mean? Like we are, we get paid the medium-sized bucks, like we're earning every one of those bucks, you know what I mean? But it's great, so but those are some of the differences. I mean, it's all, on a fundamental level as a storyteller, I'm thrilled to be working on any of these, you know what I mean? But yeah, they each have different levels of complexity, in terms of, approvals and all of that.
Gotcha. Yeah, no. The question I always ask when it comes to like these big licensed properties, what's something that you wanted to do that you were surprised to find out you couldn't do?
Oh, that I couldn't?
Yeah.
Well, I can't really talk about what I can't do.
Okay.
Partly because sometimes we end up being able to do it. You know what I mean? So I don't want to
Yeah.
jinx it by talking about it. I will say that there have been times when I pitched something that I thought was really, really great. And, I don't like it didn't contradict with anything. It was like really perfect for the moment. And
Hmm.
then we got back a no without really an explanation. And,
Hmm.
and I kind of, I was like, I bet they're planning to do that themselves in some other thing. And then,
Uh,
and then a couple of years later, I saw it come out in a TV show. So I
gotcha.
won't. I'm not even going to say what it was, but it's
Yeah.
like there are those kinds of moments where
Yeah.
there are some ideas which are really really great ideas, but you know what? Somebody else had that same idea, and they're
Right.
already doing that in another format. So or sometimes when I get those kinds of, and they can't tell us that, of
Mm.
course, in the moment, you know what I mean? But sometimes when I get those kinds of, when I get a no and it's for that kind of a reason, even though they can't tell me that, but I have that suspicion, it's like, okay, well, I can actually feel good about that one because it means it was a really great idea.
Right. Right. So, guess as we're winding down, right? One thing that you've brought up a lot, and it's sort of been a theme of your work is just, I don't know, I guess what I would say is just kind of telling human stories, right? But you've mentioned that diversity and representation is just really important to you. Um, have you thought about like, I don't know, starting up like your own like comics label or like bringing like a sort of coalition of creators to sort of bring more stories out?
Well, I have done a pretty good amount of self-publishing, you know what I
Mm,
mean, in the sense that like I did Kickstarters. I've mostly done those with Jonathan Coulton. No, I mean not only, but that's where we started. We did three three books based on his songs,
mm,
including those children's books that I was talking about, The Princess Who Saved Herself.
gotcha.
And then I've done other books since then. I did a Kickstarter how-to book. I did a cookbook. I did a book of poetry actually,
Mm,
called "I Belong to You, Motherland," which is actually an illustrated book of poetry that's about growing up in Texas, as a Asian American kid, feeling like bound to the land, but also feeling, like I don't quite belong, and exploring
mm,
that stuff. Has a lot of gorgeous art, by like this is by Sean Shen, just incredible, some incredible art,
wow.
but uh so and so there's some projects that I've done, through my own company. So I kind of have a publishing company, but I haven't done that. I haven't published other people. I mean, there have been a few times when I've talked about, putting together ventures with other folks, but
Mm,
I haven't really had the time to kind of devote to that. It is a huge thing to start a publishing company, though. I mean, it's
yeah.
one thing to do Kickstarters, but
Mm,
to do an actual publishing company that's a whole nother beast. I mean, I hugely admire folks like Spike Trotman. You know what I
mm,
mean? Like, who's a hero in the field. I think I think she's said that her comics company is now the biggest publishing house in Chicago, which is wild.
yeah.
Huge accomplishment. But she's sort of the giant in the field of that kind of genuinely indie company.
Mm,
Just by one creator that's expanded in that kind of way. But there's lots of people who are doing this kind of stuff. There's a lot of publishing companies that come and go.
yeah.
I've who knows, maybe that will be something, for the future. For right now, I'm really focusing on, you know, keeping my own business going,
Yeah.
trying to get these things done. But also I do, I do, I give a lot of, I try to help out other creators who are coming up. I try to, people talk about, like, particularly when you're a person from a marginalized background, like,
Mm,
when you when you go up that ladder, if you make it up that ladder, you don't pull up that ladder after you. You help other people up that ladder. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I've definitely, I try to do that. Whether I get to the point where I actually am proactively trying to publish folks, I don't know. But I'll always be a supporter anyway.
For sure. Okay, so well, Lilo and Stitch is out right now. I don't know how many issues we're gonna have, but we got at least 4 in the solicits, so I'm excited about that.
It'll be more than that, but yes, keep your ears open and keep getting it, friends. Keep getting
it. For sure, we will. And then you're still on Darth Vader.
Yep.
Kind of speeding towards issue 50 here. But what else are you working on? What else should we be on the lookout for from Greg Pak?
So I've got a new book which has not yet been announced yet. Okay. But it's an indie book, and I'm really excited about it. I've got I'm doing the Shang-Chi book that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And I actually have another indie book that we're actually trying to nail down an artist for this week. So fingers crossed that'll come through. So I've got a number of things that I can't quite reveal just yet. Okay. But it's a pretty exciting time, and I have some fun stuff coming out. Nice. As always, can I plug my website and that kind of stuff?
For sure.
You can always find out what I'm doing at gregpak.com, GREGPAK.com. You can buy books, signed books at gregpakshop.com, GREGPAKSHOP.com. I actually just opened it up, that store up again for a week or so. So get on there and get it while it's open. And then I'm really not on Twitter anymore. I decided I don't like that site. So, but I'm on Blue Sky and I'm on Mastodon. If you go to gregpak.com, you'll find links to my various socials. So.
I gotta find my way onto Mastodon. The whole post Twitter world of text-based social apps is so crazy.
It is indeed. It's confusing. It's a lot. I do think Mastodon is the one that, weirdly enough, I think is going to last longest because it's not owned by a billionaire. You know what I mean? So it won't get destroyed overnight by someone's fickle whims. Email me, and if you want more info, I'll fill you in. I'll hook you up with an invite to the server I'm on, if you're interested. And then, but Blue Sky, I'm also spent a lot. Blue Sky, I think, has more comics folks than anywhere else right now. And literally today, not today when you're hearing this, but today when we're recording this, they just opened it up to the public in general. You don't have to have an invite to get onto Blue Sky anymore. You don't have to invite to get onto Mastodon either. But it's kind of an exciting time. But nice. Whether, how safe all these things are, like how good their trust and safety and anti-harassment stuff is, it's all remains to be seen, but they're all better than Twitter right now anyway. So
yeah. Or X or
I refuse to call it that, but
it's the dumbest name. But anyway, well, I always leave all these conversations with homework. I'm excited. We got a lot of things you can't announce yet, which means, hey, there's an open invitation for you to come back when you can announce those things.
I would be delighted. Thank you.
Nice. So between now and then, let's pick 3 works, right? 3 books that anyone should read or could read to be like, you know what? I read Greg Pak and I like that guy.
Oh, okay. I would say, Planet Hulk is probably the no-brainer. That's the big epic that I'm best known for. It's a big space gladiator story with a ton of heart. If you are, let's see, Mechadet U is it's the most kid-friendly thing that's done. I mean, Lilo and Stitch is absolutely kid-friendly, but that's just the first issue has come out. You can get the whole 12 issues of Mechadet U right now. It's in a few different volumes. There also is a single volume, and that's Kids and Their Giant Robots. Nice. That's a thing that got adapted into the Netflix show. I'm very proud of that. You said 3, right? Okay, well then I'll give you a bit of a random one. Cooking Will Break Your Heart, my cookbook memoir. Everybody loves food, right? Everybody loves stories
Absolutely.
about food and family. Cooking will break your heart is it's packed with like so. What's my pitch line? It's something like it's the best Korean, Texan, Midwestern cookbook you'll ever read. It's like recipes from both sides of my family, stuff that
Mm,
I have learned and cooked over the years and put my own spin on, and it's all just great home food and really straightforward recipes, gorgeous pictures, and some really touching stories. There's even like some poems in there and stuff. But you can get it digitally at the Greg Pak shop, gregpakshop.com.
I'm gonna
Uh,
have to buy it. That's
please do check it out.
because no, when I'm not making YouTube videos, I'm watching YouTube videos while I'm
Oh,
cooking.
oh, yeah. This is a
So
book for you. Yeah, yeah. Please do check it out.
I will.
Um,
Listen, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm here. I got my homework, so I know what I'll be reading between now and our next conversation. But seriously, man, Lilo and Stitch is great. What I've read of Planet Hulk is great. Like, and I just really enjoyed this conversation. So, you guys, grab Lilo and Stitch. I'm assuming you're subscribed to Darth Vader. That listen, we're solicited up through like issue 46 right now. There's a lot of Greg Pak to grab. So go ahead and order that at your local comic shops. And again, you can go to gregpak.com or gregpakshop.com to get your fill. So thanks again, Greg. Excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
No problem at all.